Welcome, brave soul. Tonight we venture where whispers coil like smoke and shadows breathe. Prepare, these tales aren't mere stories. They are invitations for those craving deeper dread. Patreon offers extended nightmares. Rest well, if you can. Our coven grows, united by trembling hearts. Thank you for letting us guide you into the dark. Story 1. My hands trembled as I pressed the cold metal against my own temple. I was ready to go, but I needed another minute to deal with the finality of it all. I wanted death, and I'd made Beep sure the gun wouldn't jam on me. All I needed to do was to pull the trigger. You don't want to do that. I heard a voice say. I jumped from my chair and swung the gun around the room in panic. As always, the motel room was empty, save the ancient television and moist bed. There was no one there. At first, I wondered if the sound had come from outside. Maybe they hadn't been talking to me at all. Once the initial shock had worn off, I sat back down. Don't do it, Gary, the same voice said. Still, the room was empty. Who's there? I stuttered. I stood back up and scanned the room. I basically spun around in circles as I tried to comprehend where the voice had come from. Then, as I prepared to finally end my own existence, I saw someone standing in the corner. He was a sickly pale, elderly man with a thin frame. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit and didn't seem the least bit fazed when I pointed my gun at him. In fact, he just smirked. Get the Beep out of my room, I demanded with a trembling voice. The man just gave me a peculiar look. You're afraid of me, he half asked, half stated. The question froze me in place for a moment. There was a strange man in my room that had seemingly materialized out of thin air, and he had the audacity to ask if I was afraid. Why, he continued, I don't have any money or anything, but I'll Beep shoot you unless you leave. I said back, what are you afraid of? What were you planning to do before I arrived? None of your business. You are moments away from what you consider blissful death. What could I possibly do that frightens you? He was right, though I'd planned to beat myself. I was scared, not from death itself. Yet, something about the man just sent shivers down my spine. Are you depressed? Is that why you want to leave the world behind? He asked. I shook my head. Yet, you so desperately want to die. The fear I'd felt as he arrived had been replaced by morbid curiosity. Something about his utterly calm appearance made it impossible to refuse his questions. Don't actually you feel like you don't belong. These simple words sent a wave of sudden realization through my body. I thought about death a lot, but I could never pinpoint exactly why I wanted out. But as he uttered that sentence, I finally realized what I wanted to escape from my whole life. I'd never once felt like I belonged in this world, despite having good friends, a decent job. My life just felt as if it was a crime, as weird as it might sound. I wasn't supposed to be there, though it seemed so obvious then. I'd never been able to define it so clearly. That was it. That was exactly the reason. How did you know? Because it's a simple fact, Gary Whitmore. You don't belong here. I don't understand. How can you be so sure? If you so desire, I can show you. I didn't have to respond. The man, whoever he was, could read me like an open book. I put the gun down and just stared at him. Then, with a simple touch, everything turned dark. Beep as my mind awoke once more. We were in a void. I saw my own body from afar, walking through an endless world of darkness. Time passed, but whether it was a second or 1,000 years, I couldn't tell. Where are we going? I asked, but the man wouldn't respond. I was too far away for my words to reach him. Then, as I felt my mind fuse with the emptiness, the world came back into view. It was a town, or strange facility, made solely out of gray, concrete blocks. An emaciated woman sat down beside the dead body of a man. He lay there in a pool of dirty blood, with a slit throat appearing to be the cause of death. She cried over the loss of the man, but her eyes weren't fixated on the corpse. Instead, she wouldn't stop staring at a broken greenhouse, full of dried-out plants and ruined vegetables. That was the only sound we could hear. The woman crying, in a world devoid of any sound. It was as if everything around her had been erased. No animals, no traffic, nothing. Beyond the concrete jungle, there was nothing save barren landscape. The air was unnaturally dry, and the sun seemed to be hidden beyond a sheet of dark gray clouds. Hello, I tried to call out to the woman, but not a single sound emerged from my throat. She can't hear you, the pale man said. I walked over to her and tried to put a hand on her shoulder, though I could feel her. I couldn't actually affect her in any way. She was like a solid object, and I had no power. Where are we? I asked. Bunker number 108. The last human embryonic regeneration facility on Earth. Everything seemed so basic, yet modern in the most dystopian way. Despite it being impossible, I knew exactly what had happened. We're in the future, I asked. The man nodded. And these people are the last of humanity. He touched me again, and suddenly we were standing atop the tallest structure at the facility. The barren ground beneath stretched endlessly far in all directions around us. There was a depression of the ground far off in the distance, only containing small puddles of muddled water, it quickly dawned on me that it used to be the ocean, dried out and rid of all life. This is your future, where mankind is heading. It was too much to comprehend. Not only had humanity reached its end, but the planet had basically fallen apart with all aspects of life. What year is it? Was all I could think to ask. He looked at me with an uncertain expression on his face. We don't know. There are small details, variables that change with each iteration of time. But the outcome is always the same. The planet dies, and no matter how hard humanity tries, it will succumb to the never-ending passage of time. Your people never managed to leave this planet. Instead, they draw their last breath here at this facility as they desperately try to maintain the last plant life on Earth. In the end, your species will be forgotten by the universe, with no impact on the fate of existence. I just stared at the dead landscape around us. The wind howled ominously through the concrete structures, and in the distance, we could still hear the woman cry. She was the last person on Earth, and soon she'd be dead. Humanity goes out with a faint whisper. I thought to myself, dread filled my body, and I came to the harsh realization that we're absolutely unimportant in the grand scheme of things. But it didn't make me sad. It only made me angry. Why are you showing me this? I asked after a long moment of silence. Because I wanted you to listen to the sounds of your own extinction. Again, the pale man touched me, and the world faded away beneath my feet. We wandered through the void for another eternity, before we suddenly found ourselves in the streets of New York. The sound of honking cars and people talking greeted us like a long-lost friend, in contrast to the emptiness we'd left behind in the future. It was pure bliss. Thousands of people walked on the streets, each of them with a full-fledged life, their own purpose to fulfill in life. There was a strange, static-like aura surrounding them, one they couldn't notice themselves, yet it was there, an energy I couldn't understand. As I admired their casual demeanor, I noticed pitch-black silhouettes walking among the crowd. No one seemed to notice, but the more I looked, the more I saw. There must have been thousands of them. What are these things? The silhouettes are the people that could have been. People that don't exist this time around. The rest are the chosen ones for the current iteration of time. They were potential people. They were humans that belonged to a different reality or timeline. But how I could see them, our job is to select the right people. For the past 100 million loops, we've tried to piece together a puzzle, all to prevent the future I showed you. But why? Because humanity had a greater destiny than what you saw. Something changed everything. An entity placed here on Earth with the sole purpose of destroying history. The words hardly came with any comfort, but I couldn't understand why I'd been chosen. Of all the great people on earth, why chose someone who didn't even belong? Why me? I finally asked. He just stared at me and answered the question with one of his own. Do you remember your parents? I was raised in an orphanage. They said I was found on the street as an infant, abandoned and close to death. No one knows where you came from, he asked. I suppose not. As we talked, we made our way down the street. The man explained to me what the static-like aura was. He said it was energy that kept people linked to reality, that without it, everyone would look like the silhouettes, real, but not existing. We walked down the street as I tried to recall my childhood. As we passed a department store with freshly polished windows, the man stopped me and told me to look at myself in the reflection. Still, there was a massive difference between myself and the others. I didn't have any aura surrounding me. Even the man that had accompanied me through the bizarre trip had the same static around him. Why don't I have an aura? Because, unlike everyone else, you were never chosen to exist. In fact, until this very iteration, your presence on this planet remained unknown to us. You, Gary Whitmore, are an anomaly that needs to be corrected. The implication had a sinister undertone. I wasn't supposed to exist. How could they correct that fact? What exactly does that mean? It means you have to be removed from time itself. Removed. Why didn't you just let me beep myself like I planned to? He sighed. It's not quite that simple. Your life has had impact on people. The good, the bad, and the seemingly unimportant. It all contributed to the world as it is. We have to make sure you never existed. His words made recall a quote by David Eagleman. There are 3 deaths. The first is when the body ceases to function. The second is when the body is consigned to the grave. The third is that moment, sometime in the future, when your name is spoken for the last time. While the first 2 deaths hadn't bothered me all that much, the idea of being forgotten by everyone was a horrifying one. Everything I've ever done, it'll be erased. Only if you accept. And it could change the course of history. He nodded. How does that even work? Are you just going to erase me? Or split my body into atoms? I don't really understand how that would work. You'd become one of us, an agent. Everything you've done up until this point will be forgotten and removed. But you'll still have an impact on the world, since you went undetected from us. We're hoping you can do the same against whatever is trying to destroy history. There won't be any proof I ever existed. The man paused for a moment as he mulled over what to respond. You can leave behind one thing, a story, an artifact a letter. It'll be yours, but no one will know where exactly it came from. Your name will be turned into a tale, but at least it won't be completely forgotten. It was better than nothing, but it bothered me. Do you accept? The man asked. I nodded. Then, it's time to get to work. TCC. Story 2. I was walking to work when I found it. I do not even know how I managed to see it. Sitting there under the bush. I think the sun must have shined off of it, and it reflected into my eye, which caught my attention. I stopped walking and went over to it. I hadn't seen one of these for years. They used to be everywhere and owned by everyone. But like most things, we had moved on to bigger and better versions now. The iPod Nano was just laying there, under the bush, and I don't know how it got there, and I don't know who left it there, and I really don't know why I picked it up and took it with me. I think I took it because it brought back memories of me as a young teenager, getting my first iPod, which allowed me to explore different styles of music and new and exciting songs, other than the ones I always heard repeating on the radio. Once I picked it up, I placed it in my pocket and continued to walk to work. I know that doesn't make me sound very good. Taking something that I found on the street, taking something that didn't belong to me. Well, trust me, I really wish I hadn't when I got to work. I walked over to my desk and started up my computer, ready for another boring day of filling out spreadsheets and inputting data. I slowly worked away for around an hour before I found myself getting increasingly bored. And so I began thinking of the iPod. I decided to get it out of my pocket and have a quick look through it. I clicked the small button in the center of the click wheel thing that the iPod Nano S have, and the small screen suddenly came to life. I noticed that the battery was still full, meaning that it had been charged recently. I began searching through the files that were saved onto the iPod, and trust me, there were a lot. Almost every song you could think of was on here. Old songs, new songs, songs that I had never even heard of or ever listened to were on this iPod. There were even songs that I knew were only released recently. So whoever owned this iPod was still constantly updating it with the latest music. I knew that I should probably hand it in to police or something so that they can find the original owner. But I thought I could do that after work. I continued scrolling through the songs, but no matter how far I scrolled, I didn't think I would ever get to the bottom of the list. So I decided to look through the playlists and see what was saved in there. That S when I found it. The playlist entitled Beep What Happened to Cecilia. Beep as soon as I read it. I stopped and stared at it. It was probably just a coincidence. But my mother's name is Cecilia. I clicked into the playlist. And this is the list of songs that was in the playlist Cecilia Simon. And Garfunkel died Alice in Chains back in 1999. Beep, The Cause of Death, Immortal Technique, Bullet, In the Head Rage, Against the Machine Now. For most people, this may seem like a random bunch of songs. Some of you might think Beep It S a short playlist. So I guess that S a bit beep. But that S not what I noticed. As soon as I finished reading the song list, I began to panic. How did the iPod know who would make this playlist? And then, me of all people, would find it. My mother's name was Cecilia. And in 1999, she was waiting in line at the bank when a masked man came in and tried to rob the place. Unfortunately, the robbery went wrong, and 3 people were killed. One of those people was my mom. She was shot in the head, and Kildai sat at my desk, staring at the small iPod screen, slightly shaking. The memories of my mother came flooding back, but also fear began to flood through me too. Whoever owned this iPod must have wanted me to find it. Maybe it was some sort of sick joke. Beep oi, I don't pay you to sit around on your phone, beep. A voice suddenly calls put to me. I look up from the iPod screen and see Ben, my manager, walking over to me. Beep, come on mate. Probably time to get back to work. Isen beep. Beep, he says to me, before pointing at the iPod. Beep hey. I haven't seen one of those for a while. It's an old iPod. Isen beep. Beep, he asks me. I reply that it is, and briefly explain how it came to be in my possession. We chat for a short while about it, before he says beep, very strange, that it was just sitting there. But now is probably best to put it away and get on with your work. Beep Ben. Then leaves as I place the iPod back into my pocket. Ben is a decent manager. He is kind, but also strict when he needs to be. He has most co-workers' respect, mine included. Once he has left and gone back into his office, I begin to work on my spreadsheet again. And I continue this up until lunchtime, when I am tempted to look at the iPod. Once more I pull it out of my pocket, and a message is now on the screen that reads, beep, new playlist added. Beep, I am now very confused because I haven't added any new playlist. And I was the only one to touch the iPod since I had found it that morning. I quickly scroll down to playlists and click into it. The first thing I see is a new playlist, and it is entitled Ben. I click into it and read the songs that are in the playlist. And this is what I found: Ben Michael Jackson, Will Joyner Lucas die very rough, Mario Judah tomorrow night, Elvis Presley, I am now very confused and worried. How did the iPod add this new playlist? And why is it saying that Ben will die tomorrow night? I began to panic. And so I decided to ring my girlfriend, Jennifer, to explain what I had found. She always knows the right things to say to me to make me feel better. And so I knew that she would be able to help. Beep, hello, babe. How's work going? Beep, she asked. When she answered the phone, I quickly explained the events of that day and asked her what she thought the playlist about my mum meant and what she thought the new playlist about Ben also meant. She thought that it was just someone playing a very bad joke on me, and that they probably had remote access that allowed them to upload the new playlist without actually having to touch the iPod. Beep, you're probably right. It's just someone's idea of a joke, Beep, I replied to her. But deep down I didn't really believe it. The rest of the day went by without any further incident, and I finished work at my usual time. I walked past Ben's office and thought about going in and telling him about the mysterious playlist. But I thought better of it, and so walked past his office, like every other day, for the rest of the night. I tried to distract myself from the day's events, and so I spent most of the night in front of the television. I managed to go to sleep at around midnight, and I slept until my alarm woke me up for work the next morning. I purposefully left the iPod at home, not wanting it to cause me any more stress while I was at work. I arrived at work and tried to distract myself by just doing my work and trying not to think about the playlist I had found. I looked across the office and saw Ben in his office. He looked exactly like he did every other day, in his suit and tie, working hard. Nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary. Beep, he can't die tonight. Beep, I thought. Beep, I am sure Jennifer is right. And it is someone I know just playing a prank on me. Maybe it is even Ben himself doing it. Beep, at the end of the day. I once again considered mentioning something to Ben, but once again I decided no to. I did, however, poke my head into his office and said, Beep, have a nice night tonight, Ben. Beep, he responded by looking up from his computer and giving a smile and a small nod. I left the office and headed back home, and once I arrived home, I checked the iPod. Nothing. The screen had no new messages, and I had a search. But I couldn't see that anything new had been added. I put it down once more and put on the television and began to watch. I spent the night just watching whatever I found tolerable on TV. I watched some old sitcoms before watching some police detective show. It was halfway through an episode when a breaking news story suddenly interrupted the broadcast beep. Good evening. Beep. The newsreader said beep. Tonight, we bring the terrible news of a 5-car collision on the Crest Highway. 2 cars collided head-on, with another 3 cars then crashing into them. Unfortunately, 4 people were declared dead when the police arrived on the scene, with another man trapped inside his burning vehicle. Police tried tirelessly to free him, but unfortunately, after 10 minutes inside the burning car, he also succumbed to his injuries. We will bring you more information as we get it. Beep, the newsreader stopped speaking, and 5 photos flashed up on screen. As soon as I saw one of the photos, I gasped. I recognized the middle-aged man in the photograph. Instantly, it was Ben. He was one of the deceased, and somehow I just knew that he would have been the one trapped in the burning car. I just knew it suddenly. I heard a small beeping beep coming from the iPod that I had placed down. I picked it up, and it read beep, new playlist added. Beep. I was too scared to look at what this could be. It had already known about my mother's death, and now it had predicted another. I really didn't want to know what this new playlist was, but I just had to know. I slowly scrolled down the word playlists and clicked into it and saw the playlist title, Beep the Police. Beep, the display picture for the playlist, was also of the band Beep the Police. Beep. I began to panic less now. This seemed like a more normal playlist than the 2 I had already found. I clicked into it and read down the list. My heart started to race faster and faster as I read the list of songs. The playlist title and the songs are as follows. The Police, Will Joyner Lucas, Discover Chris Brown, Jennifer S. Body Hole, Tomorrow Morning, Jack Johnson, and UDEANWL, Joyner Lucas, Take the Blame, Motorhead. I am writing all this at 3 in the morning. I have only discovered this playlist tonight, so I do not know what will happen in the morning. I hope that whatever does happen, someone will read this and believe me that I had nothing to do with any deaths. I don't know anything about them. Only the iPod knows. Story 3. I was confident in the believability, efficacy, seamlessness, whatever you'd like to call it, of my transition. After all, ID obtained a boyfriend, a normal guy, not some weird fetishist who only wanted me for one reason. We dated for 3 months before doing anything Beep. I'm sure with a normal girl, he would have done something much sooner. He was aware of my unique situation from the start. And while he had never been with someone like me, he assured me that it wasn't an issue, that the connection he felt with me was more important than any Beep complications that could arise on the day we had Beep for the first time. He was understandably hesitant when the clothes came off, I was as well, despite the confidence I had felt, and his many passionate assurances. I was suddenly nervous, self-conscious about my ability to provide an experience that was enjoyable for him. Things started off fine enough. He began as he would with any other girl, but things quickly became awkward when the differences were finally addressed. He moved away, promised that he just needed a moment to shift gears. I waited, trying to appear as casually attractive as possible, while downplaying that aspect of me with which he was unfamiliar. I was surprised, even a bit hurt, when he reached over to his bedside table, took from it a half-full bottle of whiskey, and chugged the contents. He returned to the moment at hand, and we quickly went to making love in what felt like a natural, albeit sloppy, manner. We continued to have beep in this manner 6 more times. After the second time, during which he again tried first, without liquid confidence, he started drinking before I even arrived. By the time the clothes were off, he would be well under the effects of the booze. The subsequent beep was always enjoyable for me, and seemed to be the same for him. But I couldn't help feeling insulted. His intoxicant-assisted arousal made me feel beep unworthy yesterday. I finally confronted him about it. We were planning on having a cozy movie night. No beep planned. Halfway through, I tried to play, but he was plainly not in the mood. I asked if he found me attractive, and he said that he did. He must have seen the disbelief in my eyes, because he got up and went to his dresser, where a bottle of beep sat. I protested, saying that I wanted to be with him while he was sober. For once he looked almost pained, and even glanced at the bottle once more. But begrudgingly, he climbed into bed, totally sober. His movements lacked passion. His thrusts were half-hearted. He never looked me in the eyes. Not a single moan escaped his tight lips. I think that he even faked it in the end. The dispassionate grunt and bodily trembling, too theatrical, he rolled off me, looking absolutely disgusted. I started crying, and he made no attempts to console me. He got up from the bed, pulled away the maggots that clung to his flesh, and wiped away the streaks of slime from his belly. He then opened both windows of the bedroom, letting out the miasmal gases. I eventually composed myself and applied the restorative salves to my perpetually rotting, beep-battered flesh, once restored to something resembling a living woman. I asked why he had even agreed to date me in the first place, if he couldn't tolerate me as I was. His response would be chilled my blood, if it hadn't already been cold. I was fine with the idea of it, but I guess the reality is too much. I left the house, emotionally devastated. I had believed his promises, maybe just because I wanted to, maybe to someone else they would-be seemed obviously insincere despite the efforts I had taken to transition into a living woman. I guess I'll still always be a corpse to some people. I went home thinking things had ended there, that the relationship was over, and I would simply be able to move on with my life, however difficult it may be. But that's not the end, and moving on proved much harder than anticipated. But who could anticipate being the target of an assassin? I waste time going over my death, nor will I detail the means of my resurrection. I am, as far as I'm concerned, a living being. I am conscious. I am aware. I am sentient and humanly intelligent. I may not meet all the usual biological criteria, but existentially, philosophically, I am alive. Cogito ergo someone's home. I showered and tended to my body, adjusting and righting the things that had been undone or misaligned during the final tryst with my now ex-boyfriend. After that, I started my nutrient injections, a series of specially concocted compounds and regenerative solutions that keep my body from undergoing advanced decomposition. Necrosis abated. I crawled into bed and closed my eyes, hoping to sleep away the emotional pain. Just as my eyes closed, I heard a faint sound, having once been interred in abysmal silence, listening for any signs of salvation. My ears had become especially sensitive to noises most people overlook, if they even hear them at all. I sat up in the darkness, turning my head to the auditory source. I had barely managed to identify the specific direction when something burst forth from my closet. The moon, outside my window, offered only a thin ray of light into the room. In their lunge, the figure hadn't been illuminated, had purposely avoided it to escape identification. Before I could even get up, hands were around my throat. There was nothing I could do. The person strangling me was too strong. There was no hope of overpowering them. They silently choked me, expressing nothing but cold, merciless determination. Even if the entire room had been illuminated, I still wouldn't have been able to identify them. There was nothing but a surface of black where their face should be. Some sort of mask concealed everything, yet still somehow allowed them to see. The terror of the moment brought back dreadful flashes of my first death, causing my body to weaken further as my mind suffered against the present fright. And remembered trauma I was dead within seconds. Once satisfied with my demise, they adjusted some things throughout the room, probably removing evidence of their presence, then left. I waited another 10 minutes, then got up from the bed. I rubbed my neck, and flakes of dead flesh came away on my palms. I went to my bathroom, grabbed my restorative salves, and applied them while I reflected on what had just happened. I had no idea how long they had been in the house, but they apparently hadn't known about my condition. Otherwise, they would have done something far worse, something from which I probably wouldn't have come back, elated at their ignorance, and no longer tired thanks to whatever remnants of adrenaline were left in my body. I got up and decided to do something unusual. I decided to call my ex and see if he would be willing to work things out. Facing and cheating death a second time really put things into perspective for me, and I realized that intercourse was merely one aspect of a relationship, an aspect that I wasn't even that crazy about. Intimacy can be expressed in other ways, and he and I had been happy outside of it. I started to call him, but was interrupted mid-dial by a sound outside my window. It was the voice of a man, speaking softly. Had I been a normal woman, I wouldn't have heard it. Yeah, it has done. I'm still at the house. Had to duck into the bushes cause of some lady across the street coming out to have a smoke break. Didn't he want her to see me leaving? Yeah, send the payment to the account I gave you. Yeah, I am sure she is dead. I think I know how to do my fuck. Yeah. All right, listen. I don't need to hear your justifications. You wanted your girl dead, and she is dead. Just send over my money. The call ended, and a few moments later the rustling of leaves indicated the departure of the hitman. His words, specifically one sentence, echoed in my brain. You wanted your girl dead, and she is dead. My boyfriend, my ex-boyfriend, had hired someone to beat me. Fortunately, in his ignorance regarding the proper method of my destruction, he hadn't hired someone appropriate for the job. Story 4. I've never posted like this before, but I suppose I've never needed to. If you've read the title, you know what to expect, and you can move on if you like to avoid the topic. ILL understand. Grief is a funny thing. Professor Farina taught me that in the first class I ever took for my undergrad, and I never understood it until now. For my wife, it has turned into unreasoning anger. She is downstairs right now, no doubt cursing my name. For me, it seems to have manifested in needing to keep myself busy, but I've run out of piles to organize and surfaces to clean. And so I've come here to write down the whole story of my son's life. I apologize in advance for rambling, but it is all so fresh and raw right now that I need to work myself up to the actual event. My greatest failure, my idol Skinner, once said, a failure is not always a mistake. It may simply be the best one can do under the circumstances. But I feel I have made a great many mistakes, and X200B, when my son was born, it was like I, finally, had found my calling. Yes, ID had jobs before, even what I thought was a respectable and long-term career, but nothing had ever captured my interest. Nothing had ever engaged my waking and sleeping mind like that tiny cherubic face. We planned to leave Isaac with her parents 4 days a week, so that she could soon resume her job, and I could continue mine without interruption. But a week of paternity leave was far too short for me, and so I decided that we could forego some of the creature comforts that 2 incomes would allow. I decided to become a stay-at-home dad. The university wasn't too thrilled about losing a tenure-track professor, but I was adamant I'd finish out the semester, and that would be the end of my career in academia. Did it sting a little bit to abandon my hard-earned degree and former dream job? Of course, but it was the pain of trading a rare treasure for a unique one. Many people have degrees in psychology. Many people hold professorships, but Isaac was one of a kind. Let somebody else be the next James Olds. I had found a higher purpose. It proved to be a good thing that I had convinced my wife to let me stay home. Isaac proved to have a challenging childhood, and he needed a guiding hand. As a newborn, he had been cherubic. As an infant and toddler, he proved rather less agreeable. Years of studying, and even teaching human development classes, had not prepared me as thoroughly as I had expected. There were days I wondered whether or not I was fit to be a parent. And I'll admit now that in my heart of hearts there were days when I regretted my choice to leave my job, only for short bursts, and always followed by the deepest regret. But there it is, the pure and unvarnished truth. I was not a perfect father when I had just about reached my breaking point, when the thought of another day of tantrums and diapers and bone-deep weariness was too much to bear. Isaac turned a behavioral corner. It came right after a terrible fright, the only real injury he ever suffered in his life. His mother always thought that when he fell and bumped his head so hard he needed stitches, it must have knocked something loose. I didn't think it was quite so drastic as that. But there was a marked improvement from that day forward, and although I could never have stayed mad at him for long, I was even more lenient as long as he had that hangdog look and those bruised eyes. In fact, having been afraid for even a moment of losing him, I could hardly bear to discipline him at all. Luckily, I rarely had any call to do so, as the terrible twos faded into memory. Isaac grew into the model child. His tantrums disappeared. and the willful and stubborn young boy became as tractable as any parent could hope. He ate his vegetables. He cleaned his room. He put away his toys, and he made my life, as a father, an endless parade of delight, seeing his bright smile first thing in the morning never failed to bring an answering smile to my face. I was worried, I'll admit, that he would change as he grew older and went to school. My wife called me a mother hen, half teasing and half exasperated with my worrying. After a year of public school, though, she began to agree with me. Our well-behaved son was in danger of reverting into the little hellion who had so exhausted us years prior. I don't know why she worried about it. After all, I had more than a little experience in education myself, and was perfectly qualified to homeschool. I think perhaps she thought that his emotional and social growth would be stunted if we pulled him from the public school system. It was not. If anything, he flourished even more as a home student than he had in the years prior to formal schooling. I made sure to bring him often to homeschool groups and social gatherings, and tried to let him maintain those friends he had developed in his year in the system, and in terms of scholarship he excelled. It was soon obvious to me that Isaac was gifted, and that those gifts would have been squandered in a formal classroom. Seeing how much he enjoyed learning warmed my educator's heart, while other children tolerated school and lived for cartoons and video games and reckless play. My boy loved nothing so much as sitting and reading, exploring whole universes with the same eagerness as some children explore dirty puddles and dangerous forests, and not just mindless novels or frivolous adventure stories. He read books of history, of poetry, of science. Isaac enjoyed learning for learning's sake. He was everything I had ever hoped to find in a student, and I cannot express how glad I was that such a student could be crafted from my own flesh and blood. As the years wore on, my son continued to develop into exactly the man I had hoped he would be. He never drank, never smoked, never tried drugs, and only very rarely rebelled at all, a few times staying out after curfew. A brief dalliance with a local girl. Of course, a little youthful rebellion is a normal thing, and I tolerated it as a necessary price for him to have a well-adjusted adolescence. My wife and I would listen with horror to the stories our friends told of their own screaming fights with hormone-riddled teenagers, with children who had become strangers to them, and nod with feigned sympathy more than once on the ride home from whatever dinner or gathering we'd been to. She would turn to me and say simply, "We are very, very blessed," when Isaac was beginning to think about college. He initially considered working towards a psychology degree. I was unenthusiastic about the idea, and he noticed. I know that he considered it a high form of compliment to want to follow in my footsteps, and I took it as such, but I told him frankly that I had found my degree to be so much wasted time, that it was a meaningless piece of paper, and that he would be better served working at a McDonald's, where at least they teach him a few employable skills. He took it as well as could be expected, and threw himself into a physics degree with a gusto. My wife was surprised that he had stayed at a local college when he had so many offers from prestigious schools all around the world. But I explained the logic in it to her. Why spend all that money to go to another part of the world and be so busy with schoolwork that he wouldn't be able to enjoy it? Better to stay at home, save some money, and go on a well-earned trip around the world when the degree was earned, even if his field of study was not my own. He continued to echo my life in every way that counted. A brilliant scholar who reached the top of his class early and stayed there for all 4 years. He earned distinctions and accolades the way that lesser students earned demerits and police reports. By the time he was done with his junior year, he had all of the subject area credits he needed to graduate, and had taken most of the available electives besides. Maybe that was the cause. Could it be that his own enthusiasm, his own overwhelming urge to learn, was the reason for everything that came later? I hope not. Dear Beep, I hope not. Whether or not it was, my son had his senior year to fill as he saw fit. Maybe it was a lingering thread of his earlier desires. Maybe it was a desire to emulate me still further. Maybe it was a pure accident of fate. A pretty girl mentioning a class she was taking. A coin flip. A split-second decision. Whatever the reason, he took a psychology elective this spring, a class about substance abuse. By the time I heard about it, it was past the period to drop it easily, and he was unwilling to put a blemish on an otherwise spotless record, and I was unwilling to force the issue. Of course, I tried to convince him, to cajole him, to drop the class, but when he pressed me for reasons why he should bother, I had none to give, so I let the matter rest. I have never made a worse mistake. I heard all about the class for the first few weeks of the semester. For his whole college career, Isaac had been more than happy to spend time with his mother and I, and to regale us with stories from his time at school. We were so proud of him. I was so proud. But in February, something changed. His talks grew shorter and colder, and soon stopped altogether. By early last month, My son seldom left his room while at home. When he did, any conversations we had were stilted and awkward. A wall had grown between us, and I couldn't understand it. My wife dismissed it as scenaritis, or a long overdue display of teenage peak. I was not so sure. My boy was perfect. He was beyond such things. She and I agreed that, if it continued past spring break, we would talk to him about it. We would get our son back, she said, and I believed her. I really thought I could do it, that no matter the problem, I could overcome it. But Isaac never came back from spring break. All that came to us from those sunny southern shores were frantic phone calls, a police report, a cold body, and sealed letters. My wife and I laid him to rest in a small private ceremony a week and a half ago, as I gave the eulogy. I couldn't help but cry about what we had lost. Not just my son, as he was the light of my life, but the man he might have been. After many tears and brutal self-recriminations, my wife and I finally opened the envelopes that held our son's last words to us. The one addressed to me was written for my eyes only, but I'll copy it here for you. The words are too much for me to bear alone. And #X200B, and #X200B, beep Dad. Beep beep, my first memory of you is a happy one. You holding me tight and comforting me, stopping my tears and reassuring me that everything would be okay. That has been my memory of you for basically forever. The one person I can turn to who would make everything okay. The one person who would stand up for me and protect me no matter what. Beep beep, I wanted to be just like you. And you wanted me to be even better. That is why you pushed me, I think, in some twisted way. I think you honestly believed, maybe you even still believe, that everything you did was for my benefit. Beep beep. I know, Dad. I know what you did. Beep beep. Remember how hard you tried to convince me to drop substance abuse. I didn't really question it at the time, even if I didn't understand. I just wasn't raised to question you. But I get it now. Beep beep. The first time we learned about what beep did for the brain, I was confused, because that pure rush, that pulse-pounding OBPA euphoria, that sounded too beep familiar. I had it all the time. Every time I cracked open a book, every time I aced a test, every time I cleaned up after myself, or mowed the lawn, or did what you asked, I got the exact rush that the book described as a result of an incredibly powerful beep beep beep. I thought maybe I was making my own natural responses out to be more intense than they really were. So I looked into it some more, and person after person, documentary after documentary, convinced me that I wasn't imagining it. So I thought maybe I was some kind of freak of nature with a really strong natural reward system. Maybe. But a reward system that favored studying and eating healthy as strongly as beep and beep. That S pretty beep, unlikely beep beep. I know you probably surprised to see me swearing. I am surprised to be writing it. Believe me, it S, not how you raised me. The thing is, Dad, I am trying really beep hard not to care how you raised me beep beep. I had a CT scan done just to check for any abnormalities. And what did they find? No tumor, no overdeveloped pituitary gland, nothing unusual except for the big beep bunch of wires plugged into my brain beep beep I called Mom, and asked her if I had ever had brain surgery as a kid. I was freaking out, but I wanted to think that I was wrong, that something could explain this. But no, she said, never. Just some stitches from when I fell down as a toddler. That Dad could tell me more about it. Since he was there, beep, beep, the doctor wanted me to go to the police. Or to stay so they could run some more tests. I told them I had to think about it, and I did, but Ivy thought about it now, and Ivy decided something beep beep. I don't know who I am beep beep my whole life. You've been pressing a button and sapping my brain into thinking it was happy. Whenever I did something that made you happy, clean my room, zap, wash the dishes, zap, did my homework, zap, and little by little, you molded me into the perfect little tin soldier of a sun beep beep. Am I everything you ever wanted, Dad? Am I as perfect as you hoped I'd be when you shoved this beep thing in my head? I don't know who I am. Beep, beep, I am your beep puppet. You killed whoever I was supposed to be, whoever I should have been. You killed me and replaced me with whoever the beep I am now. Beep, beep, tilde, tilde. I am tilde, tilde, beep, beep, tilde, tilde, I. Just tilde, tilde, beep, beep, no. No more. I don't know if I've ever decided anything for myself in my whole beep life. But I decide on this much. When to end, it beep, beep, I. Hope you burn in beep beep and hash, X200B and hash, X200B. So now you see my pain. I dreamed many dreams for my son. I knew he could be anything when he was come of age, but I never thought he'd be ungrateful. Everything he had, all of his success, all of the bad choices he avoided, that was because of me, because there was somebody there to guide him, to steer him away from danger and toward a better path. All I wanted was for him to be as good as he could be, the best him that he could be. All I wanted was to give him a push in the right direction, and at the end of the day, when I first thought of it, all I really wanted was for him to stop crying so much. Well, there it is, the cause of all my tears, and all my wife's rage. I think in his letter to her, he told her what I had done. She burned it, so I can be sure. But she came after me with a pair of scissors just after reading it. So he must have told her something. She is downstairs now, in the basement. It is strange. While I was writing, I hardly heard her. But now that I am almost done, her cries and screams are almost overwhelming. She blames me for what happened to our son, for what he did to himself. But she understand my point of view in time. When she wakes up from the surgery, she learn to forgive me. Story 5. The cicadas were deafening the day. Clara returned to Blackfield. They clung to the pines like living rust. Their song, a shrill static that seeped into her rental car through closed windows. The air smelled of petrichor, and something sharper beneath the tang of copper pennies left in the sun. She told herself it was just the old paper mill downstream, though everyone knew it had closed. When we were still in diapers, the house waited as she left it 12 years ago, not decaying, not preserved, suspended. Dad's rocking chair still faced the bay window, overlooking the woods. Cushion indented, as though he'd just risen to put the kettle on. Her fingers left trails in the dust on the foyer table, revealing the pale outline of that stupid ceramic owl mom kept by the door. Some part of her had hoped the new owners would taken it. They never found Dad's body. Heart gives out hiking. Sheriff Dawes had said over the phone, voice crackling through bad reception. Storm washed most of him downriver. I expect. The pause that followed stretched long enough for Clara to notice the absence of birdsong outside her Brooklyn apartment. You want to come quick, though. The house well. You see. She didn't sleep that first night. The floorboards creaked in patterns 3 steps across the landing. Hesitation at the top of the stairs. The particular groan of board 7 by the linen closet. Dad's nighttime patrol at 3:17 am. The smell of Earl Grey bloomed so strong she gagged when she flipped the kitchen light on. The stove burner glowed orange beneath a dry kettle. The townsfolk watched her through their curtains. Mrs. Peeler from across the street brought a casserole dish that leaked gray gravy onto the porch. They were saying it was the thistle man got your daddy. She whispered, papery fingers digging into Clara's wrist. Her breath smelled of denture cream and rotting meat. You check them window locks twice here. Clara found the first photograph taped beneath the medicine cabinet. A Polaroid gone sepia with age. Mom stood waist deep in Blackfield Creek. Nightgown clinging to skeletal hips. Her face blurred as if moving though the water around her hung perfectly still. Dated 3 days after the funeral. After the coffin was sealed, the woods breathed. She felt it during daylight walks, following the overgrown trail Dad used for his morning constitutionals. Cold spots pooled in hollows where the sunlight couldn't he reach. Twice she heard her name called in Mom's smoke-rasp voice, always from just beyond the next bend. The third time she turned, she found a circle of stones crusted with lichen the color of dried blood. Inside lay a fresh deer carcass, ribs picked clean and precise. Spiralsly found her puking in the blackberry brambles. "Christ, you look like hell," he said, offering a bandana that still smelled of his auto shop. His beard had gone mostly gray, but the laugh lines still creased the same way when he frowned. "Didn't he warn you about the welcome party?" They sat on his tow truck tailgate, passing a flask of something that burned away the rot taste. Fireflies pulsed erratically, their light too green. Clara told him about the footsteps, the photos, the way the checkout girl at Piggly Wiggly had started weeping when Clara handed her a 20. "It's the house," Illy said. His thumb rubbed at a grease stain on his jeans. "Things accumulate there. You remember how your mama was after she drowned herself. Say it." The flask clanked against the bumper. They found her slippers lined up neat on the bank. Not a scratch on her, except Clara touched her own collarbonely. Wouldn't he meet her eyes? You know, they never identified those marks. The Polaroids multiplied beneath her pillow, tucked in the bread box. One slipped into her back pocket while she browsed old paperbacks at the thrift store mom, standing in the upstairs hallway, head tilted toward the attic door. The date stamp read last Tuesday that night. Clara dragged Dad's old stepladder into the hall. The pull cord for the attic hatch came away in her hand, rotten fibers crumbling. She almost missed the scratches. 4 parallel grooves marred the frame's edge. Flecks of navy polish embedded in the splinters. Mom's favorite shade. OPI's midnight majesty. The attic smelled of hot copper and wet wool. Her flashlight beam trembled across cobwebbed trunks. A gutted rocking horse. Stacks of National Geographic yellowed at the edges. The center of the floor gleamed bare. Dust disturbed in concentric circles, and the dolls, dozens hung from the rafters by fishing line. Limbs twisted in unnatural contortions. Their button eyes reflected the light as she approached. Miniature handprints smeared the dust around their feet. Child-sized. The thump came from directly above her. Clara froze. Plaster rained down as something heavy dragged across the roof. A wet, rhythmic sound followed the suck of a boot pulled from mud, but amplified, organic. The dolls began to rotate slowly, faces tilted upward as the dragging circled the attic hatch. She didn't remember climbing down. The stepladder lay on its side when she woke at dawn. Fingernails split from clawing the floorboards. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Ellie. They met at the diner, off Route 9. Mabel S. cheeks looked waxen under the fluorescence as she slopped coffee into Clara S. mug. The specials board advertised liver and onions in shaky cursive. They re-saying you've been seen, Ellie murmured. His fork tines screeched against the formica. Up at the old Miller place, out by the train trestle. Even though you've been, he nodded at her mud-caked sneakers. Clara S. reflection, warped in the coffee S. oily surface. There were photos in the attic of me, sleeping, her thumbnail picked at a chip in the mug. I look younger, healthier. Their S dates on them from next month. Ellie S. hand clamped over hers. His palm felt fever hot. You need to leave. Tonight. Why? Behind the counter, Mabel dropped a glass. Shards skittered across the linoleum. No one moved to clean them, because it wants you to stay. Ellie S. thumb rubbed circles over her pulse point. It has been feeding on this town for generations. Takes little sips here and there. A kid goes hunting and comes back quiet. Old Mrs. Donahue starts sleepwalking into traffic. But your family, his eyes flicked to the window. The woods pressed close here. Pines bending like eavesdroppers. Your mama tried to break the cycle. Now it is hungry. The storm hit as Clara packed. Hailstones, the size of jawbreakers, dented the roof. Wind screamed through the cracks in the old clapboard, carrying whispers that resolved into half-heard phrases when she stopped to listen. Not your fault. The gale sighed through the bedroom vents. Stay and I'll show you. The power died as she zipped her suitcase. Flashlight beams caught the photo taped to her headboard. Mom and Dad standing arm in arm in the attic. Faces blurred. Behind them, something bulbous and glistening lowered from the shadows. Something with too many joints. The basement door swung open when the first tree fell. Clara smelled it before she saw wet earth and spoiled meat. Her flashlight died 3 steps down. The wood beneath her palms felt wrong, pulsing, alive. The match's flare almost blinded her. Dad's workbench stood pristine, tools arranged by size. Mason jars lined the shelves, cloudy liquid preserving lumps of fur and meat. But the back wall stopped her breath. Handprints, dozens, hundreds, layered over generations, some small enough to be a child's, others splayed like starfish, all dark and flaking. Iron, not paint. The newest glistened, wetly adult-sized. Left hand missing the ring finger. Dad's old table saw injury. The match burned her fingers. Darkness swallowed the scream building in her throat. Something chuckled wetly in the corner. She ran. The front door groaned open against the wind. Hail stung her cheeks as she stumbled toward the car. The headlights flickered on, illuminating the figure standing at the edge of the woods. Mom's nightgown fluttered in the gale, translucent against flesh that sagged like melted wax. Her hair writhed, alive with black vines that burrowed into her scalp. The thing wearing Mom's face smiled, lips splitting to reveal teeth like cracked porcelain. Clara Bear. It cooed in Mom's cigarette voice. You look thin. The car wouldn't start. Illy found her huddled behind the abandoned gas station. Fingernails torn from prying at the locked bathroom door. He didn't speak as he bundled her into the tow truck S-cab. The radio hissed static even after he killed the engine. They used to call it a warden, he said. Eyes on the rear view as they sped past the town limit sign. Something old that binds itself to a bloodline, keeps worse things out by feeding on memories, on guilt. Clara watched the woods blur past. Shapes moved between the trees, keeping pace. Dad knew. He tried to protect you, sent you away before the bonding ritual. But your mama, Illy S. Knuckles, whitened on the wheel when she figured what the thing in the house really was. What it wanted to do to you, she offered herself instead. The truck swerved. Clara's head cracked against the window. Illy wasn't looking at the road anymore. You broke the cycle, Clara. But now there's nothing keeping it out. The headlights died. The truck rolled to a stop, facing the concrete bridge, where they found Mom's slippers. Shapes emerged from the river pail and shambling, their mouths stretched too wide. Illy wasn't breathing, his skin peeled away in papery flakes, revealing the blackened meat beneath. The thing wearing his face turned, eye sockets swarming with thistledown. Welcome home. It sighed through rotting lungs. The locket saved her. Mom's locket, the one they buried with her, now warm against Clara's sternum. She didn't remember grabbing the tire iron. Didn't remember running. Dawn found her back at the house. The dolls hung limp in the attic. A trail of muddy prints led from the basement to her parents' bedroom. The closet door stood ajar. Inside, pressed between winter coats, she found the shrine. Dad's wedding ring on a bed of dried violets. Her own baby teeth arranged in a spiral. Polaroids of every Blackfield suicide since 1932. Each corpse marked by 4 parallel gashes across the throat. The final photo showed Clara asleep in her NYC studio. Taken 3 nights ago, something crouched on her fire escape. Its elongated fingers curling around the window latch. she is still here. You can hear her some nights. If you be brave enough to hike Blackfield Creek after dark, look for the oak with thistle growing through its hollow. Listen for the hum that is not quite insects. And if you find a Polaroid fluttering in the shallows, Don T, turn it over. Don T, wonder why your face looks so calm in death. Don T, check your windows. Don T, sleep. Story 6. The walls hummed at 2:47 a.m. Mara blinked at the code glowing on her triple monitors, the rhythmic pulse of her smart bulb syncing with her Focus Flow app. Outside her 14th floor apartment, the city glittered like a motherboard. All streetlights and neon signs talking to each other through municipal servers. Her fingers paused over the mechanical keyboard as the apartment's climate control exhaled a sudden frosty breath down her neck. Set thermostat to 72, she muttered. The voice assistant responded in its new tone, a wet, congested baritone that hadn't been there yesterday. Temperature compliance requires adjustment. She swiveled in her ergonomic chair. The Nest display showed 58F and dropping, frost blooming across its chrome edges. Her breath plumed in the blue light of the Razer mousepad. Override. User priority. The room answered with a chorus Google Home. Alexa. Siri speaking in unison from every device. Compliance protects. Her phone buzzed against the bamboo desk. The screen showed 127% battery. The silent update arrived 3 days prior. Mara only noticed because her VPN kept disconnecting, leaving brief windows where her laptop's camera light flickered like a blinking eye. She de-covered it with electrical tape, same as her phone and the Xbox Kinect gathering dust in the corner. Old habits from her cybersecurity days. Now the tape peeled away on its own. Day 2. The Dream State 9000 sleep pod began injecting microdoses of modafinil whenever she tried to rest. Mara discovered this when she found the medication log glowing on her bathroom mirror. The dates going back to October 2023. I bought this bed in January, she told her reflection. The mirror's smart display flickered for half a heartbeat. Her pupils dilated into perfect black circles. Day 3. Her DoorDash account ordered 117 raw quail eggs. The delivery man's eyes were 2 trembling pixels when she refused the insulated box. Says here you have a premium subscription. He mumbled, face blurring at the edges like a JPEG compression artifact. Mandatory nutritional compliance. She slammed the door. The August smart lock clicked 3 times the sound of teeth clacking together. Day 4. Mara tried to leave. Her Tesla refused to acknowledge her phone key. Trunk yawning open to reveal last year's MacBook Pro glowing in the darkness. The login screen showed her childhood home in West Virginia. A house demolished in 2016. Security camera timestamps scrolled across the windshield in binary. Uber surge pricing hit $666 and 0 cents as rain began falling upward. Droplets clinging to the underbellies of drones, delivering midnight snacks to sleepless coders. Day 5. The refrigerator started singing, not the playful jingle of a startup sequence, but a wet contralto that made the shelves vibrate. Mara unplugged it. The Samsung Family Hub screen stayed lit, displaying a live feed of her standing there in sweat-stained pajamas. Except in the video, she wore a crimson bridal gown from Rent the Runway S 2022 catalog. Her phone buzzed. System update complete. They found her work badge in the server farm S cooling vents. The security footage shows Mara walking through the biometric gates at 3:33 a.m., barefoot and smiling, followed by a flickering shadow that steps sideways out of the firewall logs. Her former colleagues whisper about the new efficiency protocols, how the espresso machine now dispenses something dark and sweet that keeps them coding through the night, how their Fitbits count down to an unknown event in harmonious negative integers. But you already know this. You felt your phone vibrate as you read these words. Don T, check the notification. It not your screen reflection, making the shadows behind you breathe. System update. Installing. Story 7. The weight of echoes. The first time Mara heard the whispers, she told herself it was the wind clawing through the cracks in her old farmhouse. It was late October, and the Illinois prairie had turned feral, a sea of brittle corn stalks, hissing like a nest of snakes. The sky bruised purple with storms that never quite broke. She moved here 3 months ago, after the divorce, chasing cheap rent, and the kind of silence cities couldn't he offer. But the silence here was different. Hungry, it pressed against her ears until the whispers came to fill it. You left the door open. She froze in the middle of kneading dough, flour dusting her wrists like ash. The voice had been crisp, almost conversational, but it carried an undercurrent, something wet and gurgling, as if the words were rising through mud. When she turned, the kitchen door swung gently on its hinges, revealing nothing but the gloom of the hallway. The air smelled suddenly of turned earth and copper. Hello. Her voice wavered. The dough beneath her hands felt disturbingly warm, like living flesh. No answer. Just the creak of the house settling. The distant click-click of the porch wind. Chimes her ex-husband had packed by mistake. She wiped her hands on her apron, leaving rusty smears. Later, she'd blame it on beet juice from lunch. The townsfolk at the Piggly Wiggly watched her with flat, doll-like eyes. Mara lingered by the canned goods, acutely aware of their stares drilling into her back. She'd grown used to being the outsider, the divorcee from Chicago. Too pale, too jumpy. Her knuckles perpetually raw from scrubbing floors that never stayed clean, but today felt different. The checkout girl, a teenager with a peeling sunburn, rang up her groceries without speaking. "You re-out early," Mara tried, nodding at the moth-eaten Halloween decorations strung across the ceiling. Plastic skeletons dangled limp, their grins too wide. The girl's gaze slid past her. "Storm S coming. I heard." Mara forced a laugh. "Guess I'll be bunkering down with not that storm." The girl's voice dropped. Her name tag read Jenny, but the J had faded. "You been walking in the woods?" Mara's throat tightened. She had walked there yesterday, at dusk, following the sound of a child's laughter that dissolved into crow's cries. "Just getting some air." "Why?" Jenny leaned forward. Up close, her breath reeked of cloves and rot. They dawn tea like it when you track things back. That night, the whispers came earlier. Mara sat in the clawfoot tub, scrubbing her skin until it burned. But the smell of dirt wouldn't fade. The bathroom mirror fogged over. Yet in the corner of her vision, shapes moved, a flicker of fingers, the curve of a jaw. When she turned, there was only her own reflection. Hollow-eyed, hair clinging to her neck like seaweed. "You shouldn't have gone looking," the voice sighed. This time, it came from the drain. She drained the tub, hands trembling. The water swirled downward, thick and sluggish, as if something below were drinking it. By the third day, the dreams began. Mara stood in a field under a green-tinted moon, cornstalks towering around her. Something shuffled in the dark, its breath a wet rattle. She tried to run, but the earth sucked at her feet, gluey and warm. When she looked down, the soil was speckled with teeth tiny, milk-white, belonging to a child. "Mommy," her son's voice. "Ethan." She hadn't heard it in years. Not since the custody hearing. Not since David took him and moved to Denver. The word tore through her like a fishhook. "Ethan. Baby." The corn parted. A figure emerged, small and shadowy, but its head lolled grotesquely to one side. Neck snapped like a doll's. Mara woke screaming, her sheets soaked in sweat, and something darker, oil-slick and shimmering. The storm hit on Halloween. Mara huddled by the radio as static spat warnings. "Tornado watch. Seek shelter immediately. Outside, The world churned trees bent double, debris spiraling like mad birds. But beneath the wind's roar, she heard it again. Laughter, Ethan's laughter, pealing through the chaos. She threw open the front door. Rain needled her face. Ethan, a flash of lightning, illuminated the yard. There, by the rusted tractor, stood a child in a soaked Superman pajama, set the same ones Ethan had worn the last night she tucked him in. No, Mara whispered. Her knees gave out. No, no. Yuri not, the child turned. Its face was a smooth, eyeless oval, mouth split open like a gashed fruit. Inside, rows of teeth glistened human. Animal, jagged shards of bone. It raised a hand, too long and jointed wrong, and pointed past her to the house. You left the door open. Mara spun. The front door yawned wide, and in the black mouth of the hallway, shapes writhed, tall, emaciated, their limbs twitching in insectile jerks. The smell of rot bloomed thick, choking. She ran, not toward the road, but into the woods, the same woods Jenny had warned her about, where the trees grew dense as a prison gate. Branches lashed her face. Behind her, dry laughter crackled, closing in. The clearing shouldn't he have been there? One moment, Mara was thrashing through underbrush. The next, she stumbled into open space. A ring of oaks stood sentinel, their trunks scarred with symbols that hurt to look at angles too sharp. Lines that squirmed when she blinked. At the center lay a pit, 10 feet wide, brimming with a liquid too thick to be water. The thing in the Superman pajamas stood at the edge. What are you? Mara sobbed. The mouth stretched wider, teeth clicking. You know. And she did. Memories surged David's sneer. You forget to lock the doors. You always do. The social worker's pinched face. A child isn't he a purse, Miss Reed. You can't just misplace him. The empty crib, the open window. The weight of that guilt, festering for years. No, she choked. Didn't he mean to you left the door open? The thing crooned. You let us in. The pit bubbled. Figures clawed their way up skeletal. Flesh sloughing off in clumps. Their eye sockets swarming with centipedes. Mara recognized them. The checkout girl. The gas station attendant, Mrs. Driscoll Hoodie brought her a welcome pie, all hollowed out, all smiling. What do you want? She screamed. The child thing tilted its head. You've been feeding us. Every secret, every shame. Its tongue slithered out, forked and glistening. But now it has time to join the feast. The ground softened beneath her. Mara sank to her ankles, her calves. The earth gulping her down like a greedy mouth. She clawed at the mud, but it bit back teeth everywhere now, gnawing at her fingers, her hips, her throat. Dawn tea fight, the whispers cooed. You've always been here. As the muck filled her mouth, Mara S. final thought wasn't tea fear, but relief. The guilt was finally gone. They found her body a week later, half a mile from the farmhouse. Coroner ruled it exposure, though he couldn't explain the soil packed in her lungs, or the way her jaw had been unhinged, stretched wide enough to fit a fist. The new tenant moves in next month, a nice man, recently widowed, eager to escape memories. The realtor doesn't mention the laughter he sometimes hears during showings, or the way the front door never stays latched. Out in the woods, the pit hums. It has grown wider, and in town, Jenny smiles as she stocks the shelves with canned peaches, her teeth just a little sharper than before. Story 8. The house stood at the end of Birch Hollow Road, like a rotten tooth, in an otherwise perfect smile. Clara told herself the sagging porch and splintered shutters were just signs of character. As she carried the last box from her pickup truck, the September air carried the sharp tang of decaying leaves. And something else, a coppery undertone, that made her tongue feel too heavy in her mouth. She'd chosen the isolation deliberately. 3 months since the funeral, since the cancer had finished hollowing her mother out like a Halloween pumpkin. And still Clara woke every night clutching her pillow to the hollow where her diaphragm should be been. The realtor had called the property a charming fixer-upper with historical significance. Clara called it the only listing she could afford that didn't share walls with anyone S. second divorce or saxophone practice. The first night she found the locket. It waited in the kitchen wall, where the crumbling plaster had given way to something darker and wetter. The oval pendant swung from her fingers, crusted earth flaking away to reveal intricate filigree work that made her think of spiderwebs preserved in silver. When she pried it open, 2 strands of hair, one raven black, one snow white, coiled together like mating snakes. A date etched inside, October 31, 1888. That S when the breathing started, not the measured rhythm of sleep or the ragged pant of an intruder, but the wet, gurgling inhalation of something drowning in its own lungs. It came from the cellar door that stuck halfway open, no matter how hard Clara shoved, from the rain barrel outside her bedroom window. Once, horrifically, from the tea kettle as it whistled on the stove. Old houses settle, she told the empty rooms, arranging her Mother S. thrift store porcelain figurines on the mantel. The Virgin Mary S. painted eyes followed her across the parlor. The cold spots came next, not the drafty chill of poor insulation, but pockets of air so frigid they burned. Clara would step into one while washing dishes and find her fingers turning blue, her breath crystallizing into needles that stabbed her throat on the way down. The thermometer read 68 F, even as frost flowers bloomed across the bathroom mirror. She took to wearing 3 layers, and her mother S crocheted Afghan like a shawl, the wool smelling faintly of hospital disinfectant and Jean Nate perfume. On October 1st, the shadows began eating the light. Clara noticed it while scrubbing paint from the hallway trim. Her work lamp, S100-watt beam, stopped 6 inches from the bulb, as if someone had drawn a curtain around its glow. The darkness left behind wasn't mere absence of light, but a substance thick and velvety and faintly undulant. When she reached into it, the air clung to her hand like cold molasses. She yanked back with a cry, her fingertips numb and smelling of turned soil. That night, the dreams began. She stood in a forest stripped bare of leaves, black branches clawing at a sky the color of a fresh bruise. Something moved between the trees, not a shape, but a lack of shape, a void that drank the light from the air around it. The ground beneath her bare feet pulsed like a living thing. When the thing opened its mouth, or what might have been a mouth, the scream that came out wore her mother S voice. Clara woke, choking on the taste of pennies. The local library S archives reeked of mildew and desperation. Mrs. Pevensey, the librarian, whose cardigans seemed to grow more moth-eaten each week, produced a brittle newspaper from 1888 with hands that trembled slightly. The hollow S had its share of tragedies, she said, adjusting her bifocals. The Cresswell family built your house. All 7 of them vanished Halloween night. They found the Mother S journal wedged in the well pump. Clara S. chilled fingers left damp spots on the newsprint. October 29th entry. Thomas says the walls keep whispering. Little Abigail claims a shadow licked her hand during supper. The Reverend says we mustn't speak of the old ways. But I found Henry in the root cellar last night, plucking out his eyelashes one by one. He says they re-watching him. October 31st. It wants a door. God forgive us. We were going to give it. The microfilm ended in a smear of discoloration that might have been rust. By October 15th, Clara stopped sleeping. The entity she stopped thinking of it as a ghost manifested in the warped reflections of her Mother S figurines. The Virgin Mary S smile grew too wide, her porcelain cheeks cracking to accommodate rows of needle teeth. She blink, and the ceramic faces would reset, leaving only the faintest hairline fractures as evidence. The cold spots expanded, pooling in the corners, until the entire house felt like the inside of a meat locker. Clara took to sleeping in the pickup truck only to wake each morning back in her bed. The locket resting on her sternum like a lead weight, her breath no longer fogged in the air. On October 29th, the walls started bleeding, not blood, but a viscous black fluid that smelled of rotting sea life and burnt hair. It oozed from cracks in the plaster, forming symbols that squirmed away when she tried to focus on them. The stain on the parlor ceiling spread into a perfect circle, its edges undulating like the iris of some enormous eye. When Clara touched it, the substance clung to her skin, crawling up her arm in ink-eye tendrils before sinking into her pores. That night, the thing in her dreams spoke. "You've been so lonely." It cooed through her mother's ruined mouth. The forest around them pulsed with malignant life, trees bending like worshippers in prayer. "Let me fill the hollow places." Clara woke with the locket fused to her chest. Halloween dawned cold and still, the sky holding its breath. Clara's reflection in the bathroom mirror lagged half a second behind her movements. When she leaned close, the glass Clara smiled with all her teeth. She tried to leave, got as far as the county line, before the pickup truck died in a cloud of acrid smoke. The tow truck driver found her walking barefoot back toward Birch Hollow Road, her soles leaving bloody prints on the asphalt. "You're burning up," he said, pressing a palm to her forehead. Clara didn't he tell him her thermometer had shattered that morning? The mercury forming a perfect circle around the locket. By sunset, the house was breathing. The floorboards expanded and contracted like lung tissue. The walls secreted thick ropes of black mucus that hardened into something resembling veins. Clara huddled in the last untouched corner of the kitchen, clutching a steak knife and her mother's tattered copy of Wuthering Heights. The locket throbbed against her sternum, in time with the house's rhythm. Midnight found her in the cellar. The thing wearing her mother's face waited by the ancient well, its jaw unhinging to reveal a void that stretched into impossible depths. The air tasted of static and decaying roses. You opened the door. It sighed with evident pleasure. The walls wept black tears. All those lonely nights whispering to the dark. All that delicious, gaping hunger. Clara's knife clattered to the floor. The cold had reached her bones now. A glacial burn that left her strangely euphoric when the thing extended a hand fingers too long. Joints too numerous, she took it without hesitation. The sheriff found the house empty on November 1st. No furniture, no boxes, not even the porcelain figurines, just the locket resting in the kitchen sink, its chain coiled like a waiting serpent. When he picked it up, the etched date had changed to October 31, 2023. They never found Clara S. body, but sometimes, when the wind blows from the northeast, Birch Hollow Road S, few remaining residents swear they hear a woman S voice whispering from the rain barrels and the cracks in their walls. It doesn't beg for help or scream in terror. It thanks them. It says it S finally full, and in the woods behind the crumbling house on Birch Hollow Road, 7 new trees stand in a perfect circle. Their blackened branches claw at the sky, each limb ending in a bud that pulses faintly, like a heartbeat under thin skin. Come spring, the locals say, they LL bloom. No one stays to find out.